Ready? Play.
And it's points that I think we probably need to talk about because, oh boy, in the last sort of week, there's been a whole hoo-ha about the WTA ranking points because, of course, the WTA did not give us advance notice this is how this is working.
Yeah, I think that's the part about it.
Yes.
Like the WTA had to put an article like literally explaining why there's been a new #1, which I think isn't like the best look for tennis.
Is this
because
a
it's
rule
like,
change they literally just decided, or they just decided to keep from us?
Yeah, and also like we didn't know when it was going to be dropping. Like it just so happened that it was like the week before because Iga and Arena weren't playing the last 500, so they just dropped it right before, and it was like going to happen eventually that like Sabalenka would overtake Iga depending on like how the rankings were going, even if like say Iga had played Wuhan or something, like it could have happened like this, but just like the way that it happened, and then like the loss of points, and then it gets to the whole bigger thing about like the 500s in general and like where are we at with that right now, like so many mandatory tournaments. That's like a whole different conversation. But also just like if you have to like write an article explaining what the rankings like why the rankings are shifting like this, and like it wasn't very clear the whole thing, then it should be like ranking should be like very self-explanatory, but
yeah. And that's the thing that's bothering me the most. We've got into conversations before about, like I've been in conversation before online or on the show about the expectations of WTA players and how many tournaments they play and how much is too much. And I've always gone with player health should dictate. Player health should dictate. And now you could make the argument that actually most WTA players play 20 tournaments a year. In fact, you don't have to go very far down the rankings until you sort of even get mid top 10 level to see players who are playing 20 tournaments a year. It's the top players who don't so much, and they're the ones who are getting hit the most by this. And it's Iga and Arena, because Arena's losing points as well, just not as many as Iga. By the way, this is not about a particular player. My counter would be, but because they're going deeper in the bigger tournaments, especially the ones the last 2 weeks, they are probably playing as many matches as the people who are playing the 20 tournaments to make up the results, but they're worth fewer points. So I don't know that. I would like to do the research to do that. Vanch, if you decide to do that first, go for it. But
well, I can tell you this: that Iga's played the most matches of anybody this year, even though she's missed the entire Asian swing. She's played 67 matches, and
she's played 67.
Sabalenka's at 66, so right below her. But like, literally, the goal of the mandatory tournaments is to get people to play. And if you're winning so much and you're getting to play so many matches a year, like that kind of, like they're kind of fulfilling those requirements anyway. So I just don't see like, I mean, the ATP, for example, has 8 mandatory 1000s, 4 500s, which seems fairly fair to me. Like 4 500s is perfectly fine instead of 6. And then obviously you have the 4 majors. So it's just like the sudden jump from like going from playing 12 mandatory requirements to then all of a sudden have 20, where like, let's be honest, most of the top players are not meeting that. Like most of them are getting penalized at least a few points in the top 10, at least the players that are playing. Like it goes for Paulini, for Goff, for everybody. Like they were all deducted a little bit, but it just so happens that this means that we have a new #1, even though like obviously, Arena would deserve it. She's won more slams. She's won, like she's leading the race, and she probably end up finishing the year #1 anyway. But I think it also just, it kind of, we were looking forward to a really nice finish to the end of the year with a real race at the WTA finals. And now I just think like something absolutely dramatic would have to happen, like an absolutely dramatic drop off from Sabalenka and like Iga just tearing the field or something to even give her the chance. So that's not really like a huge story anymore. Whereas before it actually was. Before the point penalty thing, it was more of a story and possibility. But now it's like it's almost all gone.
It's massively undercut the drama behind the battle for #1 at the WTA finals, because now it's going to come down to Arena having a horrible tournament for Iga to have a chance of getting it back. And
whereas before it was like 770 points, whereas last year it was like 630. So and also so it was like a similar situation as last year, which was which ended up being really good for the tour because you played one match that kind of decided it at the end. Obviously, Iga still had to win the tournament, and this was in the semis, but like now we don't have anything like that
and this is the thing that annoys me more, to be honest, is that the WTA have now shot themselves in the foot a little bit because it's now made it more confusing to follow the sport and less dramatic, which for me is the worst thing you could do to any fan, no matter how many years you've been following tennis. I want to be able to, like, I use the live rankings a lot because I can't be bothered to do the math. It's complicated enough anyway to work out point drops and then potential gains. Like, I enjoy doing that. Vanch, I know you probably enjoy that, doing that even more with your amazing maths brain. But there is an element of complication enough. But now you've got to factor in whether they played enough 500s, so suddenly some 1000s don't count.
Yeah, because before it used to be like just a 0-pointer, right? But now you're getting negatives off of like mandatory tournaments that you did play, but it's your worst result. And so if you're like Iga and your worst result happens to be around a 16, then it obviously you're penalized more, right? Because you're getting penalized for being more consistent. Which at that point, I don't know if that's really, like, I can see obviously why Iga fans were pretty upset about it, because it's like, kind of.
Yeah. Look, if you're an Iga fan, of course you're going to be upset. I'm coming at this from a WTA fan. I'm not bothered too much whether Iga's number 1 or number 2. I think she's still.
It's more about the whole structure, right? Like the whole.
Yeah. And maybe, we're talking about tournaments played. Maybe there needs to be something built in around actually the threshold for mandatory play, in terms of like, should be matches played, because there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, it would be fair on the top players. They actually play as many matches as everyone else by playing fewer tournaments because they're going deeper. But also, the reason why the WTA want to make 20 mandatory tournaments is so that you get the top players on television screens as many times as possible. And but you also want to keep your top players healthy and fit, because otherwise it does damage the spectacle of the sport that they're not able to perform potentially. For me, you want to try and mandate how many matches a player takes part in. And, they're going to get the penalty anyway if they suddenly underperform and lose a bunch of matches, because they'll just drop down the rankings and then they're not the people anyone's talking about anymore. There's a natural thing that will balance out there, but it's kind of them going, okay, well, we want to get Iga Swiatek playing as many matches as possible because we know loads of people watch. We want to get Arena playing as many matches as possible because that's what. And so maybe mandating how many matches a player plays rather than tournaments would maybe mitigate that, provided you did it on the right way.
Yeah, I could see that working. I could also see that being more complicated. I mean, I think if you like limited the number of mandatories a little bit, then you could already do a lot here. But also, I think it also depends on like financially. I know the ATP has like a huge incentive for players to play 500s, because there's this like bonus pool at the end of the year where like the top 30 players, like you get bonus points for, like, if you won the most number of points at 500s, then you get like extra incentive money. Sometimes there's appearance fees. I know like the WTA maybe just doesn't have that in their budget, because it's obviously financially it's a lot harder for them right now, and they've taken a big hit. But also they've increased the number of 500s, and then they've limited the number of 250s that top players can play, where they can only play like one every year, right? Something like that. Like every top 10 player can only play one.
And it has to be either somewhere that they're defending champion of, or it's their home tournament.
Yeah, so I just think that's not great for the lower tournaments as well, because you want good fields in those too, right? You don't just want amazing fields at 500s. Like, obviously amazing fields at 500s is great, but then also when they're in the same week as the two, like a 250 and a 500, it's like, who's actually like watching Guangzhou? Like, I know we are, because we're diehard fans and like we love the sport, but I don't know how much media attention that's getting versus this, when there's like, some really good stories there, and like, I don't know if that's like the best way to promote like the sport overall, because I also feel like the amount of 500s that there are, they're not all equal, in terms of the fields, and you're seeing a lot of withdrawals, retirements, like players just entering tournaments and then playing one round and then giving a walkover and retiring because they just physically like can't do it anymore in terms of their bodies and in terms of like just meeting that threshold of 6 or 5 or 6, I guess. which seems like overkill, especially because the 2-week events are coming now, and there's going to be more 2-week events next year, and the requirements are still the same. So and this is not even including like Billie Jean King Cup and Olympic year this year. So I just
it needs looking at, and I definitely agree. The number of mandatory tournaments needs to be reduced. That's the
you have 10 1000s right now. You can make 8 of them mandatory, and then and you can make 4 of the 6 500s mandatory, and then you're still like you're at somewhere in between what it used to be and what it is now. Because I just think where it is right now is too much for players' bodies, and we should listen to the players a little bit more when they're talking about like longevity, because you want the best product, right? You don't want like players just showing up at your tournaments and just to make the tournaments happy, but you also want them to play their best tennis.
I think the counter the WTA will put forward is, but most players play at least 20 anyway. The answer is they do, but they go out in the first round much more often.
Yeah, exactly. And then they need to play more and more and more to accrue, like half the number of points, because that's just kind of how it works. You have to win to get more points, more ranking, more seeding, better seeding, and I just think it's in a bit of a tough spot. Even though like it's good that there's a lot of 500s in some ways, like it keeps us entertained and everything. But I just I don't know if that's ideal, especially like the week after a slam, the week before a slam. Players are just kind of playing because they have to, and then you don't really end up getting the best.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.